Welcome to our next session, Going Electric, Why and How. It's great to be with you this morning. My name is Jess Wilson and I am the local state member for Kew, and it's terrific to be with you here at this event, Electrify Burundara. And thank you to all the volunteers who have helped put today together, and very excited for our next session with our terrific panellists. Can I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. Today, we are here to explore the key motivations that we see are driving people to make the switch to electric. That might be cost, comfort, health, and of course, climate. And each of our panellists today brings a very different perspective, and together we'll see how those reasons overlap and strengthen one another. Let me briefly introduce each of our panellists. Trent Jones, who is the Managing Director of All Electric Homes, working at the forefront of building and supporting all electric homes. Dr. Magdalena Simonis AM, leading Australian health expert, Director at the Climate and Health Alliance, here to share how electrification protects our well-being as well as our planet. And Alison Reeve from the Grattan Institute, who looks at the big picture of energy policy and financial incentives. So I'll invite up our first panellist this morning, Alison Reeve from the Grattan Institute. Alison is the Energy and Climate Change Program Director at the Grattan Institute. She has 2 decades of experience in climate change, clean energy policy and technology in private, public, academic and not-for-profit sectors. Here to bring her incredible expertise to Electrify Burundara, please invite Alison to the stage.
Thank you so much, Jess. And I would just add my acknowledgements to the elders of the Wurundjeri Nation as well. Now, I am today going to give you a very quick overview of why it's a good idea to get off gas, why it's not easy for everyone, and also, because we have the ear of a politician, I feel obliged to at least say what governments should do about it, as well as what individuals can do. So, for me, there's 2 compelling reasons why households should be thinking about shifting away from gas. And the first one is that it's good for the planet. But the thing that I wanted to communicate here is about 1/4 of Australia's national emissions come from producing and burning gas. And that is a real problem if we want to get our national targets for emissions reductions, whether that is the 2030 target, the 2035 target, or getting to net zero by 2050. Now, the thing is, and if you can see the chart, you'll see that the residential wedge of gas there is actually very small. The reason that we should still worry about it is because getting rid of those emissions is a logistics problem. There are about 5 million homes in Australia that use gas, and if we want to get them all off gas, that's going to take a fair amount of time. And the rate for Victoria, if you want to get to Victoria's net zero target of 2045, is you need about 200 homes a day to be switching between now and 2045. The second reason that you might want to do this, and this kind of if the environment story is not enough for you, and that is that it saves you money. Everyone's calculations on this are different. You probably heard from Saul this morning if you were in that panel about what it is, and there'll be people out in the Expo who can talk you through this as well. These are ours from 2022. Our estimate then was that at a Victorian home that had gas heating, gas cooking and gas hot water could save around $1,400 a year if they switch to all electric. Now, $1,400 is a pretty sweet saving, right? You can do something pretty nice with an extra $1,400 a year. And so to me, that's what the other part of the story as to why this is worth doing, is that it's good for your wallet. You've got good reasons, but it's not easy for everyone to get off gas. And I want to acknowledge that. And there's sort of 4 things that I want to talk about on that perspective today. One of them is about home ownership and money. About 30% of all households are in rented houses. And if you're in a rented house, your landlord chooses the appliances you have. He chooses she chooses your stove, your water heater, and your heating system. And so you might want to get off gas, but if your landlord doesn't, you're going to be stuck. The other thing is, even if you're not renting, there's still, depending which state you live in, between 3 and 8% of owner-occupied houses are in multi-unit buildings. Maybe not so much around this area, but if you're somewhere like around the old Port Melbourne, for example, lots of people now shifting to living in apartments. And getting off gas in these buildings often means that you have to have a negotiation with the owners' corporation. And that is not for the faint-hearted, as anyone who's had to do it will know. There's another group of people who might own their own home, and it might be a freestanding home, but they're not in a position to get off gas because either they don't have a lot of ready cash, or they're just someone who is on a low income or a fixed income. And so for those people, even if they really like the idea of those long-term savings, it's not going to be easy for them to access them because they don't have the upfront money. And that really brings me to this, the upfront cost of buying your electric appliances versus your gas ones. Efficient electric appliances at the moment do cost a little bit more than gas equivalents. There is one exception to that, which is if you're happy to switch from a ducted gas heating system to using a split system. But other than that, you're going to have to pay a little bit more upfront in order to get that efficient appliance that's going to save you money over time. And that is important across all of those groups I was talking about in my last slide, right? A landlord is unlikely to choose a more expensive appliance for you. If you live in a multi-unit building, your owner's corporation is probably going to want to default to the cheapest things, not the more expensive one. And if you're on a low income or a fixed income or you just don't have a lot of ready cash, you're probably going to bias towards that cheaper appliance. The third reason that I wanted to talk about is that often the decision we make about some of these appliances in our home, we make it in a rush. Around 400 households in Victoria woke up this morning and found that one of their gas appliances was not working. Now, if that was their water heater in particular, they want that fixed within 24 hours. And in fact, if they've got small children, they want it fixed by bath time tonight, right? And the thing is that what this tend to lead to is you get a pattern of like-for-like replacements because people want to do things quickly. So what you can see on this chart here, it's a survey of people in Victoria, and what it was asking them is, if you replaced an appliance in the last 12 months, what was the old one and what was the new one? And what you can see there is that really strong like-for-like effect that if you had a gas water heater and it broke, you replaced it with a gas one. And that is completely understandable, but it's this sort of having to make a decision quickly can often lead people just to bias towards the status quo, even if the status quo might not be in their best financial interest or in the best interests of the planet. The last thing that I want to talk about, and this is not an individual problem, this is a systems problem. And that's what we call the network problem. So up until now, I've just been talking about what electrification means for individuals. But there's also a collective problem in that the gas network costs the same to run regardless of how many people are using it. It could be 10 people or 10,000. It costs the network owner around the same amount of money to run that network. And if we see large numbers of people choosing to switch away from gas, those people who are staying, whether they're renting in a multi-unit building or on a low or fixed income, are the people who are going to have to pay for the cost of keeping the network. Now, that cost for most people is already more than half of your gas bill. Half of your gas bill at the moment, if you've got gas, is actually paying for pipes in the ground, not gas that you're using in your house. And if we leave this unaddressed, this could go into what people call a death spiral. People leave the gas network, the cost of being on gas goes up, the economics then look better, so more people leave, so the cost goes up again, and eventually we get to a point where it becomes actually very inequitable. We've got people who can leave the gas network, have benefited financially from doing so, and the people who can't are stuck there and paying much higher costs than they used to. And so this is one of the hardest problems in the energy transition to solve. No country has yet solved it satisfactorily. Everyone is struggling with it, but it is one that we need to get onto fairly quickly, because if we let it get out of control, we potentially end up with something where either gas network companies go bankrupt, which is not good for anyone who is still using gas, or we end up with a situation where the poorest and most vulnerable people in our society are paying very, very high costs for their basic energy needs. Okay, enough about the problems. Let's talk about what we can do. So I'm going to split this into households and into governments. So for households, first one I think it is actually a really good idea is go and find out what incentives are available to you to help with some of those financial barriers. And I mean, the fact that you have all turned up to this thing today, I think is a really good sign that you're interested in solving some of those barriers for yourself. The other one though that I think is important is thinking about planning ahead so that you're not replacing your water heater in a rush. You don't have to throw away a perfectly good appliance if it's still working, but having a sense about what it's going to take to do that replacement, who you're going to call, even just knowing how old your water heater is and therefore how quickly it's likely to break. Doing that little bit of pre-planning is really going to help you when it does come to the crunch point. The other thing I think is that there are some problems here where we have a collective problem and we need governments to step in and help. One of those is getting started on this today. I talked a little bit about the fact that this is just in a lot of ways a logistics problem. If we have to get 200 households a day to switch, then we need, that number is easier to manage if we start it now. Providing certainty, I think, is also important because coming back to that, thing of saying to households to plan ahead, it's easier for households to plan ahead if government is also planning ahead, communicating clearly about what's going to happen when, and so on. And then the final part really is to deal with that network problem. Because again, the earlier that we start grappling with that, recognising that it's not going to be easy to solve, the more chance we have of making our journey away from gas being one that is good for our wallets and good for the planet and smooth for everybody. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you very much, Alison, for that very comprehensive presentation. I'm delighted to invite next to the stage Dr. Magdalena Simonis AM from the Climate and Health Alliance Australia. Magda is on the board of the Climate and Health Alliance Australia, which focuses on driving system-wide change to ensure that organisations remain responsive to emerging challenges, particularly in the areas of health and climate. Dr. Simonis is also a practising general practitioner, a researcher with the University of Melbourne Department of General Practice, and an experienced media contributor and health columnist for The Australian. Please invite Magda to the stage.
So this is obviously, we're talking about electrifying Boroondara, but it's a bigger issue, isn't it? Because we're really talking about health. I'm talking about health impacts of climate change in particular. CAHA, if you're not aware, is the Climate and Health Alliance of Australia. And we are a consortium of over 100 health professional groups, varying from doctors, vets, pharmacists, physiotherapists. We all believe very strongly that environment, climate, and climate impact health directly. And we're seeing the effects of this and have around 48 professions across Australia and New Zealand, and we create documents and policy papers which we then submit to government and try to use our influence from a health lens. We also welcome members who are individuals who don't necessarily have an alliance with a health organisation. So if you're interested, you're welcome to explore. Now, the problem, of course, for us, and why I'm here as a doctor, we see people who do not necessarily believe or care about climate science. We see people who are usually at their most vulnerable and who have health problems. And we see health problems, and we have been seeing health problems that are directly related to climate and environmental factors, which we're learning more about. Now, just to understand that these are not necessarily things that we as clinicians were taught about. So through our training, this was not embedded in our training. We did not have environment and health climate impacts embedded in our teaching, but more and more we're seeing this, which is why we're now retrofitting our education programs at universities also to talk about the impacts of climate on and environment on health. And we're talking primarily here about removing gas from our homes. And there are several very obvious problems which gas creates. It's a polluting fossil fuel. It pollutes the environment where it's extracted from. and it also harms the health of our planet, but it also has impacts all the way through from where you extract it, those who live around those areas, to then those who use it in their homes. Health harms health at every stage of life, from extraction to combustion. Our gas appliances, of course, are a common source of this pollutant, which is invisible. So gas, methane we can smell, but we can't necessarily smell carbon monoxide. And these are toxic gases that are emitted from our appliances, whether we use them or not. There's leakage. And so the more vulnerable you are with respect to your health, if you've got a cardiac condition, if you've got a predisposition to asthma, if you're malnourished or you have malabsorption disorders, autoimmune disorders, your risk of exposure and your dose of exposure increases the health harms. And we're seeing these things. And then the health impacts of gas, we're experiencing this dramatically because, of course, chronic disease is one of the biggest burdens that's facing our economy at the moment, and governments are really talking about the GDP, the gross domestic product, and how much of that we spend towards health. Well, we're seeing that climb steeply, and chronic disease is one of the biggest burdens, but we're also looking at the environment and its impacts on health as a significant contributor to this particular health cost. So, of course, we look at the source, where all the phases of gas extraction and in our environment, from the source, from where it's extracted, to its emissions in the air, to its exposure in our homes, the dose. Now, the dose is something that varies from person to person. The healthier you are, the less impact it has on you, interestingly. The stronger your immune system, sometimes that does advantage you in other ways. So if you're a child, if you're an elderly person, the impacts are going to be much more dramatic. And so there's this inequity in the impacts of health harms, also of climate change and fossil fuels, which we need to consider. And of course, the cost to the economy. What we don't know is how much we're exposed to necessarily in our homes. But what we do know is that we need to be responsive. We need to be responsive as individuals when we explore our options, such as, transitioning from gas to electricity. And we were talking earlier on about the barriers and the cost barriers. And one of the members of the audience raised the question in a way which was really more a discussion point around the fact that how do you motivate people to make change, to improve the planetary health and their own personal health? How does it become meaningful for them so that they can make these decisions? And as doctors, we're in a position where we can use that leverage to an extent to help people understand that the decisions they make in terms of what they buy, what they consume, and also greening their environments and getting involved in council and local politics and attending sessions like this, and also attending and writing to government to request change, is something that we also try to integrate when we're talking about these health harms. But the particular matter in particular is what we inhale, like air in itself is not invisible. If you see it up against the light, you'll see that there are lots of little fragments in it, and they are the particulate matter. And the smaller the particles are, the deeper they embed into our lungs. And particulate matter, which is less than 2.5, which is what gas particles are, can be inhaled and can excite the tissue and create chronic inflammation. So these are the vulnerability factors. I think there are the personal, systemic, and the wider impacts, which I won't necessarily talk about because we're talking about heat-related illness, mental health impacts of climate change. Food and water security definitely impacted, and we see that vegetables and fruit become more expensive, and meat becomes expensive whenever we have droughts that kill off our stock. So it directly impacts individuals, but people don't necessarily realise that this is a climate impact. They just think that it's a disadvantage that they're facing day to day. But we have an opportunity to share that through this conversation. And basically, cooking with gas in the home is estimated to be responsible for 12% of the burden of childhood asthma. And we know that asthma as a national disease affects about 5% of the population, which is one of the commonest diseases, chronic diseases. So this is a significant contributor to asthma and hospitalisation. So there are the direct medical costs, there are the indirect costs, and then there are mental health costs of course, having a chronic disease, but also the expenses related to treatment. And we're finding that the burden of disease and the cost of seeing doctors, the cost of having to seek medical attention for people who have chronic disease is really impacting individuals and their choices. So we're seeing women who are single mothers in single household families with single incomes, that they're actually making a decision regarding whether they eat or whether they take medication. And we're witnessing this over and over again. So, and it might not be something that they tell the doctor about, but it is something that is being documented and collected. In fact, by the Pharmacy Guild collected these particular statistics, interestingly. And then there are the social determinants of health, such as exactly what I suggested, that the poorer you are, the more constrained your finances are, the more impact this has on you. So we have had the Beetaloo Basin project in Northern Territory, which was objected to by paediatricians, and this was a group of paediatricians who acknowledged that fracking gas had extreme impacts on health, such as acute lymphoblastic leukemia, birth defects, heart disease, premature death. This has been collated from 300 peer-reviewed scientific articles from the impacts of fracking and gas extraction in the United States. And this is a reality which science has demonstrated, that whether you live downstream or upstream, the risk of these diseases varies accordingly. So your risk of exposure will determine your outcome. So it's a cause and effect relationship. We in the city don't know this, we don't necessarily experience this, but this is people who live in these areas where they extract the gas, and we need to be mindful of this particular conversation, that when we're making decisions, we're also making decisions that impact those individuals who live in these areas. And this is obviously just the climate change effects on health. As you can see, it's vast and extensive. It's a very important slide, and I've probably touched on each of these, but not in great detail. And of course, the good news, which of course Trent is going to share with us very shortly, and Saul talked about it in the first session, is about really being optimistic and techno-optimistic. I particularly liked that, and switching from fossil fuel to electric, and the benefits of that. And we're talking a lot about really the cost-saving benefits of this, and I don't think that that's come across so far to the communities as we hope, and I think better communication is going to make a big difference there on all our parts. So thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
And our final panellist for this morning is Trent Jones from All Electric Homes. Trent is the founder and managing director of All Electric Homes, a pioneering company dedicated to transforming residential and commercial energy use in Victoria. Please welcome Trent to the stage.
Hey guys, thank you Magna and Alison for your chat on disadvantages that gas does. We're going to talk about some stuff in the residential sector, apartments and rentals, so hitting those three common areas that we see a lot out in the field. What we do is we help properties get off gas. There's no property that I look at that I see that's a challenge. The biggest challenge comes down to cost, and that's one of the biggest barriers that we have. How do we overcome that? So I'm going to go through some of those with you today. The reality is that using the rebates that we have here in Victoria, we are very lucky in all of Australia. So to get off the gas here in Victoria as opposed to any other state, you get in at half price. That's thanks to the state government, the federal government, and some local government activities that are going on. So it's our job to expose all those rebates and savings and put them in front of you. So it's literally half price, and I'm going to show you some real case studies that we've got up here around those costs and savings. So Solar Victoria, VEU programs and some local government programs, there is up to $30,000 in subsidies per dwelling. 30,000. Actually, we've seen some houses that are above that. It just depends on what technologies are going in, right? If you don't have the capital cost to pay for that up front, so there's two types of people that we see in this space. You've got savers, people who are good at saving money and have access to cash to pay for these things up front. And then you've got the livers. The livers are the people who don't have cash. They don't save money. They tend to live each day and generally use finance to get around. So there's an outcome for both the savers and the livers, right? So the livers, we rely on finance to get these things done, and I'm going to show you what finance looks like. So using rebates, using finance if you don't have the cash, and the savings that you get and the comfort that you get once you electrify are unreal. This is an example of what we try to do with our customers. We try to create, if you need to use finance, right, to do your upgrades, we try to set up cash flow positive situations. So what does that mean? So in this particular example here, right, this particular house was spending $250 a month on a dual fuel home. So that's your both gas and electricity bills. So if we design it right and you upgrade and get rid of all the gas, you are saving heaps of money on your bills. If you get rid of your gas completely, put a solar system on your roof to run all your new highly efficient appliances in, you're going to make some big savings over the year. What we've seen in real time, over $3,000 a year in savings. So if you don't have the cash to afford that, we find a really low green loan finance option, and they're out there. Heaps of people are now supporting this, the banks. So if we can get your repayments less than what your monthly expenditure is, you're in a cash flow positive situation. So you can say, yes, let's do these upgrades today because you're going to have money back in your pocket every single month until the project's paid off. What we're generally finding is if you do a full electrification in your home, the average cost after all rebates is around $20,000. Your return on your investment, we're seeing anywhere between 3 to 6 years. So that tends to be the sweet spot there. And if you do use finance to pay for that, we can set up cash flow positive situations. So it's just unlocking all that and being able to see all that in front. And if you do go to our stand, we have the calculator there and we can show you some things around your particular house. So this is a case study. This is one that we did in Frankston just over 12 months ago. It's a 3-bedroom townhouse. This particular lady, her name was Robin. She was very lovely. She's actually been at a few events for us speaking her story. She lived in this particular property with her daughter. It was a mixed fuel home. She had gas ducted heating, gas hot water and a gas cooktop. She had no solar. When we do transition, guys, we're disrupting your house, right? We also got to disrupt your behaviour. So there's a few things that we need to change if you want to maximise your savings, and that's if savings is the most important thing for you. There's generally 3 motivators we see that people want to get off the gas, and one's health that we just heard about. What we see as the biggest motivator is cost of living. 80% of all of our inquiries is, can you reduce my bills, and how do we do that? So that's one of the biggest motivators. And then the environment, right? So it's really good for the environment by doing this. So with Robin's home, we ripped out her gas ducted. Now, she was happy with a single head split system to do majority of her heating and cooling in her home. And this is where you get your biggest savings if your heating in your home is the thing that costs the most to run. So you can replace that with a new heating and cooling ducted system, but they're also pretty inefficient and they do cost a lot to still run. So if you can be open to using single head split systems for your heating and cooling, that is going to be your best option going forward. These are all things you need to consider. You need to be willing to give up a few things if you want to save the most. We pulled her gas ducted heater out, put a split system in, ripped out her gas instantaneous hot water service, put a heat pump hot water service in, ripped out her gas cooker, put an induction cooker in, and then put a nice 6.6 kilowatt solar system on to run her whole home. Now, it's hard to see, but she was spending $3,800 a year on her dual fuel home in her energy and gas bills. After these upgrades, our software predicted she would save $3,000 a year and have a 3.7-year payback. So that was a proposal we put forward to her. She was really rapt by this, and so she accepted. Now, once we did the upgrade for her, we tested and tracked her movements over the next year. Every 90 days, we checked in with her to see how she was tracking along our projections. Now, this is the actual result. So up the top, the proposal, she was spending $3,800 a year. We estimated her bills would reduce down to $711. The actuals on the right there, she's on track for a $600 bill for the whole year on an all-electric home. Now, this particular project cost her only $12,000 out of pocket to electrify an entire townhouse. This is a project that's got some pretty good publicity. A few of us saw this. This is an 18-block apartment building in Brunswick. Now, these guys had a common gas hot water system. So shared gas is pretty common in older apartment blocks. So if you have them, there is a solution around it. This case study is pretty unreal. Wait till we get to the numbers. They had common failing gas system that was supplying hot water around the whole building. These guys were spending over $20,000 a year for hot water, and then that was equally divided amongst the 18 buildings, and that's essentially how they charge for their gas hot water. This was a failing system. These guys We're just trying to find the best solution going forward. They approached us at the High Life Expo, which there's another chat on about this sort of stuff. Unfortunately, it's the same time, so you'll get my version of it. So what we did here is we ripped out their common gas hot water and we used the Activity 44 VEU rebates. These rebates are quite significant, and if you can understand them, there's huge value to be made. Now with that, without pulling out the common gas hot water, putting heat pumps on the common area, we then put a solar system on top of the roof to help offset as much hot water production as possible. So these guys were paying 20 grand a year to heat hot water, and our solution, you'll see what they're paying after we electrified it. So what we did, projections and actuals, right? Again, we test and measure everything. We projected would reduce their energy consumption by 86%. We're on track for 93%. We projected 16,500 in savings. We're nearly at 18,000 in savings. We've smashed the CO2 reduction. We've hit that on the head, over 26 tonnes reduced per annum. Their payback on this particular project was under 2 years, which is pretty unreal. And ongoing, like we've given them an 8-year warranty on the products, so they've got peace of mind that for the next 8 years at least they won't need to spend a cent fixing this stuff. So this is a pretty cool project just to show you that the impact's real, the return on investment's real. We just need to be a bit more open-minded about how we attack these things. And what's been really hard to date is electrification requires multi-trades. Right? We require sparkies, plumbers and refrigeration mechanics to get this thing done. And this is why this is difficult, because traditionally the suppliers operate in silos, right? We're not working together and we're not tackling this at once. So once we open up and look at this, again, in my view, it's really simple. We just need to put it together. And it's events like this, it's the community groups, it's the non-for-profits that are trying to push all this. You need to listen and jump in and be on board with it, because they provide tremendous value and just unpacking great stuff. Into the rental market now. So these guys tend to always miss out on things. What's really cool is the minimum standards are changing. Basically, October 2027, if you're a landlord and you have gas assets in that house, you'll be pretty much forced to push them to electric. So if not now, it's going to be pushed the next 2 years. Gas, hot water, end of life, you won't have a choice, it's got to go heat pump. Your heating and cooling, all rental properties must have a cooling system in the main living room of every rental property by 2027. So if you're a renter, your landlord's going to be forced to go this way, but just keep that in mind now. If you're either a renter or you're a landlord, just understand that there are rebates around this stuff too. So the VEU program, they're not means tested, right? So if you've got gas assets in your property, you get rebates for ripping them out and putting heat pump technology in. So just be mindful of that. Don't replace like for like, as Alison was showing us before. We do not want to go down that path. You won't be allowed to in rentals. Touched base on this before, 3 motivators: lower bills, health and comfort, environment. They're all there, the barriers. They're in each area of the market, but none of them can't be solved. Money does fix a lot of things, and there is finance around it that can help pay for these things up front, and you can have the benefits from day one. And that's me, guys. Thank you.
So, I mean, I've been working on energy and climate policy for 20 years, and I actually got into it by accident, but that's another story. But I think the thing for me about the particular thing around gas in households is when I first started working, I actually spent a lot of my time convincing people to put gas in because it was at that time cheaper and better for the environment. And that story has flipped. And the other thing that has flipped is that story around the economics of being an all-electric household has just gotten so much better. And to me, that's great for a couple of reasons. One, because at a really macro level, if we are trying to persuade governments to do more on climate change, if there is space there because people can actually benefit from the transition, I really feel like we should be telling that story a lot more. And then the other side of it is actually I rented for a long time. And so the other thing that I've always been really passionate about is making sure that everyone gets access to these savings. It's often, and that's sort of why I sort of emphasised it a bit in my presentation, is because not everybody owns a house, and we are actually looking at a younger generation now who are going to find that harder than ever. And if we really want this transition to work out, and be good for the environment and be good for everybody's wallets. It has to be genuinely good for everybody.
I'm a doctor. I see people who suffer health problems and have been exposed to the issues affecting climate and health, connecting the two from very early on. So in all the policy and development and advocacy that we do at CAHA, we look at the climate and health connection, and we try to embed climate and health as a policy strategy in all health policy moving forward in the national preventative health strategy for disease prevention. So chronic disease prevention. I think as a GP, certainly when we've had floods, fires, I've seen firsthand what the fire impacts have on respiratory conditions. So when we had the fires 5 years ago, the bushfires in Victoria, very close, we were inundated with children, families who had acute asthmatic exacerbations. We ran out of asthma inhalers. Pharmacists ran out of asthma inhalers. We had to use our nebulizers round the clock for some of our very vulnerable patients. And we're also witnessing more of this again now. So I'm seeing my chronic asthmatics, despite the advancement in medication, that their chronic asthma is actually worsening, and certainly worsening with environmental conditions. So there are days where they really just shouldn't go out. And that's not just pollen related, that's also particulate matter in the environment, the air pollution levels. So these are things that we're now trying to talk to our patients about. So that's what's brought me on my journey, certainly. And I think that getting that across is really important to government.
So I'm an electrician by trade, 20 years in industry. So what got us into electrification, I suppose it was always in my veins. But about 5 years ago, when electrification started becoming a bit of a thing, I found it so hard, even as a supplier and a contractor in this space, to actually do it, fragmented, as I said before, about the solo or silo suppliers in this space. It was very hard for me. So we had to build it all in-house, where we built our plumbers and our HVAC divisions. And so I found a huge problem in the industry, and we've been trying to solve it over the last 5 years. So here we are today, and it's amazing. Yep.
And where do people go to?
Yeah, so part of my journey 5 years ago, again, me being in industry, I found it so hard to navigate this space with the information online. Like, the government are trying so hard to get as much out there as possible, but I think it needs to start with the suppliers, with the tradies that need to be informing, the people out there that need it done. So that is very confusing, and it's still confusing today. Like, every 6 weeks there's a policy change happening, and we've got to get our heads wrapped around it and then understand it and then make sure we're informing you with the correct information. That is still super hard. The Solar Victoria has heaps of information on their website. The VEU has heaps of information on their website, but the rebates are coming from all different places, right? So it is a little bit difficult in that sense. But a good supplier should understand where everything is and make it simple as possible. All these rebates should be done at point of sale for you, so you're not having to source them anywhere. Make sure you get them done at point of sale, and your supplier should do as many of the applications on your behalf. There's only really Solar Victoria. That's the one that you guys really have to put some input into. But again, your supplier should at least commence that for you, so it's easier.
Thanks, Trent. Great advice. I'll open up to the floor for questions. Do we have roving mics? Yes. Belinda?
Good morning, good afternoon. Alison, I'm interested to know whether there is some benefit in the network problem to try and target subsidies so that the people who are at the end of the pipe and working back towards the middle, is that something that the Grattan Institute is playing with?
We haven't, I think conceptually you're right. And that is the sort of thing that you would hope that network owners would be doing. But at the moment they're largely not, although there are some isolated examples in the smaller networks of people who own those networks saying, okay, we're going to get out of this business, let's do it in a staged way. And so, you get to a point where there's not that many users on a bit of a network, you're actually better off financially, giving them an incentive to move on to electricity. It might be cheaper to pay them to leave than to keep them on. So we're not seeing that on a really, with the big networks at the moment, but we have seen it with some of the little ones.
I lost all my panels when my roof leaked, and they're about 10 years old, so I've lost those. I live in an old church school with very, very high ceilings. We've stopped our gas heating system throughout because it went bung and we didn't want it. We put in split systems, but they just make the hot air go up to the roof, even if you turn the thing focus down. So I'm wondering, I would like to get out of gas for hot water, and I'm wondering the alternative system for heating the house, because it's very cold in the other parts, and some rooms there's no point in putting a split system in. And what should I do? Thank you.
That sounds like a Trent question.
It's a me problem. Great question. So with the cathedral ceilings, it's always hard when you've got these big ceilings, all the heat rises in. The best way to get the heat down is, the cheapest way too, is some ceiling fans. If you can get away with that, that will just push that heat down a little bit. With smaller rooms, when you're trying to heat them, yeah, you're absolutely right. It makes no sense to put split systems in some small rooms. So if heating's important to you in those rooms, my suggestion is smaller radiator panel heaters. They are electric, so they don't work on a heat pump technology, so their energy efficiency is like 1-to-1. But if it's only for a small period of time and in short, sharp bursts, it can just take that chill off the air. So, or if it's a small bathroom, for example, you can use instant heat lights to heat small bathrooms as well. So there's some pretty cool technology out there, and if you guys got hydronic heaters, right? There's two ways we can upgrade hydronics: is to go a heat pump outside, but it's quite expensive. But if you've only got a few panels inside your house, the technology out there for radiator heaters, which they still work on a very similar technology, but the water gets heated inside these little panels and a little pump moves them around still, and they're isolated, right? So you can rip off where all your panels are, and these Wi-Fi and talk to each other. So they give you the exact same feeling of the heating, but just in a different way.
Quick question, what's stopping me going for solar panels is the batteries. I just hear so many bad things about batteries exploding, that they need maintenance every 2 years. How safe are they?
Today, batteries are very safe. You look on the news and you hear of EV car fires. You don't hear about when ICE vehicles catch fire, do you? It doesn't get televised on the news, and there's a lot more of those that happen every single day. So, I haven't seen a battery catch fire. I think a lot of it's just a bit of scaremongering, and I think you need to do a bit more research on the actual facts around batteries and what they do. So the lithium ion is very safe to put in homes. They wouldn't be pushing it. The federal government's just pushed it, right? You've got $2.3 billion to spend on batteries. We're estimating over 700,000 batteries are going to be deployed in the next 5 years in Australia. So have some trust around that. And that battery subsidy, guys, is here until 2030 or unless gone. So if you are sitting on the fence and considering that, please look into that. The batteries are moving a lot quicker than they expected, and the subsidies are going. So once they're gone, you've missed out. So just keep that in mind.
I just got a quick question about the resistance to changing over to electricity. Twofold. First, we put in a heat pump 4 years ago in our house when our hot water system died. And when the emergency plumber came out, I'd done some research before and I gave him that exact model that we wanted to get for a heat pump. And he had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. And they never got back to us with a quote because it wasn't on their product list. And secondly, when I talk to people about putting in heat pumps and split systems, there's a lot of resistance to the space and the look of it outside the house. I don't have space for that, or it looks ugly. I'm just wondering how we overcome those barriers.
Yeah, so as I was saying before, we're changing the way we operate the house, right? So you've got to be willing to negotiate with yourself about what and how things look. So if it's costing you a bomb to run your heating and cooling and you're using a gas ducted system in the roof, you might have to sacrifice something in order to make that happen. So that's got to be in here, right? So you got to have that conversation with yourself and be willing and be prepared to give up some things or change your behaviour and how you use the property. The one about your supplier, right? Yes, it's very common, and we need to educate them a lot more because there is resistance out there. You guys call a professional, you rely on them to give you the right advice. I'd say 80% of the people you're calling now still won't know what to do. They're not up to speed with the rebates. It took me a long time to figure it all out as a supplier. Right? It's a little bit easier now because we've got, like Reeve, and there's a lot of other wholesalers that are trying to upskill their plumbing network to go to this space. So they, at the start, a lot of plumbers saw the whole electrification thing as a threat to their industry, okay? So you've got to understand that mindset from that industry, right? They go, it's a threat. No, I'm not going to support it. Don't listen to them. They just got that old mindset. A bit like Alison said before, that they told gas was king, gas was the best, and now we're told it's not. So it is confusing. But what we know today, and it's an absolute fact, and I'll argue until I'm black and blue with this, electricity is cheaper to run than gas. There's no way you can argue that against me, and if you do, we'll go have a chat about that. But they're the facts, and we just got to get used to that. That's the new way of going forward. So if you do come across a supplier that is resistive to that space, try and do the right thing and tell them, educate them. And because if you educate them, they're going to then maybe hopefully go back and learn a bit about it, and then make sure that they're providing the right information going forward.
Looking at how we're going to be able to replace a gas hot water system on an apartment block for 50 people. We're on the owners' corporation trying to figure out how we get the buy-in and actually get the technology paid for without bankrupting everybody in the building. So where do we start?
I think that's a you question. Go and look at 18 Brunswick.
So that the first thing we do there is pop out the site and have a look and see what's possible first before you take that to the committee, because you want to make sure that the proposal will fit and it's fit for purpose. In regards to financing it, there is strata finance available at the moment for electrification activities. We've got a few sites currently underway of a transition. Again, we've got some more case studies coming through, but the High Life Expo was really good for exploiting the electrification around apartment buildings. So I'd suggest you jump on the High Life Expo's website around that. That team, we'll be feeding them case studies for them to put on their website so we can understand this space a lot more. But yeah, if you've got common gas, hot water, doing apartments, come and see our stand and our guys can absolutely help you with that. But it starts, guys, all this sort of stuff, right? It starts with the conversation first. Let's go to the site, let's see what's possible. And then once we do that, we can put forward a full-on proposal that you need to take to your AGM to convert the rest of your... Because with apartments, guys, it's a little bit different to homes. You've got to build a case study because you were presented to a board, right? So if it stacks up, the ROI is there and it ticks a few boxes and you've got access to finance easy and it's cheap, it's really a no-brainer. But it's putting all that together, right? And that's what we've missed this whole time.
Sorry, I live in a high-rise apartment building, more than 100 apartments there. And the economic case for us changing from a centralised hot water system, which is all gas, to heat pumps is a no-brainer. And our owners' corporation may well accept that. I hope they will very shortly. The problem, though, of gas-top cooking in our apartments, we get free gas for cooking because we're charged gas on the basis of the amount of hot water we use. So several people in our apartment block have changed to induction. We've changed to induction. Before we changed to induction, as a $2,000 installation, we went off to IKEA and bought a $50, $49.90 I think it was, single burner, it was a single top induction top. We parked it beside our existing gas one and didn't use our gas for 6 months. We managed with a microwave oven and this little one burner sort of top for $50 to convince ourselves that it was absolutely feasible and in fact far preferable to cook with induction. For the cost of $5,000 or less than $5,000 now, our whole apartment block could be supplied with a little one station induction cooktop to prove to those owners that in fact it works. It's absolutely pittance to pay. Now, I haven't seen any suggestions from government or anyone like that the health benefits that come from non-gas cooking could be could be spread around to lots of people by making a loan system available to any apartment people or anyone who wants to check out induction cooking very, very cheap. I'm sure if I went to IKEA, I'm not a salesman for IKEA, but I'm sure if I went there and said, I wanted to buy 100 of these units, that they'd probably come down in price. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think you go on the health one.
I think that what you said there sounds really sensible, and what you've demonstrated, what you've identified is the transition from one to the other that requires a mindset change. Because if you're accessing free gas, then switching to something that is other. What's the motivator? So I think that this being encouraged is very sensible. And I think that what you've also pointed out is that it's about communication. So how you communicate this, one, to the residents, and two, to the board, to make this investment. And that is the sticking point around making change. And I think that what you've got there is perhaps a really interesting case study, if you were to, because then that would be a really interesting way of getting people onto induction cooking. So as doctors, that's one of the instructions that we're giving our patients who have chronic asthma and who have lung disease, that if they have gas cooktops, one, to not use them and use an induction cooktop. I've been talking about air fryers. I think they're fabulous. So, even with air fryers, they're really spectacular. Microwaves, certainly, and induction cooktops, as you said. I didn't know that you could get them from IKEA for so cheap.
I mean, I'm aware of a case study in Canberra where a developer had built a development that was all electric. It was the first all-electric development suburb in Canberra. And he was finding there were about 30% of people who'd come and look at those houses and go, I don't want to buy it because it doesn't have gas cooking. And what he did was he got local restaurants to come and put on cooking classes in the display home. And that number of people who didn't want to buy went down to 5%. Because people need to have that touch and feel experience, exactly what you did, and it's exactly what I did in my house as well. I've got one of the little IKEA ones. And the other thing that's really interesting about that is that is how the gas industry got us hooked on gas cooking in the first place. Because in the 40s and 50s, when gas started to be rolled out widespread and gas stoves became available, companies like AGL used to put on free cooking classes for housewives. They were all housewives in those days because gentlemen didn't cook. And that's where Margaret Fulton got her start as a cooking writer and cooking teacher, was as a cooking teacher for AGL. And it just goes to that thing of I think cooking in particular is in some ways the hard one because it's something we do every day and it's quite personal and it's tied up with culture and community and family and so on. And so that touch and feel experience is actually really important for people feeling that they can make the change.
Thank you very much. And we have come up against time, but don't worry, I'm sure our panellists will mingle for a few minutes after. Can I please thank Alison, Trent and Magda for their time today? We all appreciate your insights and enjoy the rest of the day and good luck on your journeys. Thank you very much.